It's kind of a known fact that Godzilla has had a crap ton of games that have been released over the years. And unfortunately, the gaming media hasn't really been too nice to the giant lizard when it comes to his video games. But a lot of fans, like myself, we give a little bit more leniency towards Godzilla and his games. For instance, a lot of us, including myself, are big fans and have a lot of fondness for like Godzilla Monsters of Monsters on NES, or Godzilla Generations, or even more recently, the Godzilla game that came out on PS3 and PS4. Yet some people always ask, has there ever been a Godzilla game that has truly been up there with the best of the best? Well, actually, yes there has. Today, I'm going to be looking at a trilogy that defined a generation and made many childhood memories for a lot of G fans. I am of course talking about the one, the only, Godzilla Atari Pipeworks trilogy. I am so very excited to be delving into these games. The games were developed by Pipeworks Software and published by Atari. These games came out around the time of 2002 to 2007. These games have been regarded and praised as the best Godzilla games ever, hands down. No other games have even come close to the level of quality that these have been. Let's take a deep dive and look at these games and see why they left such an impact on us G fans and the gaming industry as a whole. But before I begin, I'd like to give a massive shout out to Wikizilla, because without him, I wouldn't have been able to write this script. He allowed me to use his articles to grab the information that I needed to write this video. Go and support his site. It is a fountain of Godzilla knowledge. I also want to give a massive shout out to Super Godzilla Gaming, as I use a lot of footage from his channel. He has a lot of super high-def footage of these games, and I unfortunately don't have the equipment to record every one of these games in such a good quality. Go subscribe to him, guys. He's awesome. He posts a lot of Godzilla gaming related content. But without Wikizilla and Super Godzilla Gaming, this video would not be as informative nor entertaining to watch. So with all that out of the way, let's get into the Godzilla Atari Pipeworks trilogy retrospective. Let's start from the beginning. Here we have the very first game in the series, and my personal favorite. This was the first Godzilla game I ever played, so I may be a tad biased on here. But this game is just so damn good. Get it? Damn? Anyways, I played this game way back on the GameCube when it first came out. I was a wee little lad in elementary. I remember saving up and going to my local EB Games store. Do you remember when GameStop used to be called EB Games? And I remember going up there and saving my pennies, and I remember going in there and grabbing the game and bringing it home. Oh, it was such a great time. I had a ton of fun with the game. Then later the game was released on Xbox, and I got it later on there. And it blew my mind with the extra content, with some more levels and Kiryu. And the graphics were just way better than the GameCube. What a way to start off a trilogy.
Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee is a fighting game developed by Pipeworks and published by Atari for the GameCube and Xbox. The GameCube version was released on October 8th, 2002 in North America, November 15th, 2002 in the PAL region, and December 12th, 2002 in Japan. On April 16th, 2003, the Xbox version was released exclusively in North America.
The story mode isn't the most in-depth, and nor does it really get you immersed into the world of the game. But I do love the cheesiness and campiness of the cutscenes. It makes you feel like you're watching a Godzilla movie.
The plot begins when the Vortak transmit a signal to Earth stating that they seize possession of all Earth's most powerful creatures. They demand that the Earth submit, demonstrating their strength by attacking numerous towns throughout the world with monsters. However, one monster breaks free from the Vortak's mental control, fleeing Monster Island and fighting with the other monsters. After killing them all, the Vortak transport it to their mothership to be killed by their most powerful weapon, Mechagodzilla. After victory, the monster is transported back to Earth and the Vortak flee, threatening to return one day.
Since this was the first game in the series, the developers didn't have a lot of choice in who they could pick for the roster, mostly thanks to Toho being stingy with the selection of kaiju they could choose. Even so, the roster is really not that bad to start off with. The only thing that held this game back with the character roster is that some characters are cloned characters. They're just reskinned, like Godzilla 90s and 2000, and King Ghidorah and Mecha King Ghidorah. They have the same moveset, but technically different characters.
Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee has a total of 12 playable monsters, 3 of which are available right away, and the 9 which must be unlocked by regularly playing through adventure mode. It has you start out with Godzilla 90s, Anguirus, and Megalon. Then you go on to unlock Destroya, Gigan, Godzilla 2000, King Ghidorah, Mecha King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla 2, Kiryu for the Xbox version, Orga, and Rodan. There are some other monsters that are featured in the game but are not playable. Hedorah appears at random. When Hedorah flies above a monster, its energy regeneration slows. If it is struck by a beam, he will flee the scene. The Purple Mothra Airstrike power-up can be used to summon Mothra. She uses her antenna beams to strike opponents of whoever called it. If she's hit by a beam, she flees as well. Mothra eventually becomes a playable character in the sequels. On an interesting note, there were some unused kaiju that were going to be in the game, but were scrapped. Baragon was supposed to be an exclusive monster in the PlayStation 2 version of the game, but he was cancelled along with it. According to developer Simon Strange, Baragon was about 70% completed when he was scrapped, with audio tracks and Baragon's fire breath still present in the game's files. Baragon would later appear in Pipeworks' other Godzilla releases. The original Godzilla was considered for inclusion in the game, but it was never taken seriously. A long-running story said that he was dropped from the game since there were already 2 Godzillas, although this was not the case. This Godzilla does, however, appear in the Wii edition of Godzilla Unleashed. Toho denied Atari's proposal to incorporate Jet Jaguar in the game. Jet Jaguar would go on to appear in the game's sequels. Kiryu was not included in the North American GameCube edition because Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla had not yet been released outside of Japan. Kiryu was omitted from the game's North American GameCube release in favor of the Heisei Mechagodzilla. However, Kiryu replaced the Heisei Mechagodzilla in the Japanese version of the game. He was then later featured in the North American Xbox release of the game as Mechagodzilla 3. Alongside the Heisei Mechagodzilla, who was now known as Mechagodzilla 2, Kiryu would eventually appear in both of the game's sequels. Space Godzilla was not in the game, but he did appear in the sequels.
In my opinion, this game has the best controls hands down. It feels super slick and quick. There isn't much lag between pushing the buttons and seeing the result on screen. Even though you're a giant beast, you don't feel sluggish in this game. I felt though as the series continued on, the controls got a little slower each entry. Still, there's no denying that the controller scheme for this game was done masterfully.
For movement, you control the monster's path with the control stick or D-pad. Because your monster immediately faces the nearest monster opponent, all movement is in relation to the location of your opponent. Using the left trigger, this makes your monster duck. High attacks miss your head as you duck. The run button is essential for reaching somewhere quickly, as it causes your monster to travel regardless of where your enemy is. While running, you can't grab anything or utilize energy weapons. The right trigger makes your monster jump or fly. To jump, press and release or hold fly if the monster can fly. This can be used to easily hop over barriers. In terms of defense, all monsters have 300 hit points to start, and most hits deal 5 to 30 points of damage. You can't have a fighting game without blocking your opponent. You block by pressing the Y button or Y and left trigger at the same time. Regular blocking and duck blocking are the 2 types of blocking. Regular blocks negates any physical attacks that does not land on your feet. You are free to move around while blocking. Low attacks are countered by duck blocking. While blocking, you can be grabbed. Head level attacks can be deflected by crouching. You can also hide behind buildings by crouching. Interruption is another defense strategy. If your opponent is carrying a building or charging a beam attack, you can swiftly fire your beam attack at him. Running away is also often the best option. No beam weapon stretches across the entire screen, and you might hop away from a building's trajectory to avoid it. When attacked, knockback is triggered in addition to damage. Light, stagger, knockdown, super knockdown, and null are 5 forms of knockback, as well as the state effect stun. Light knockback only has a minor and temporary effect on you. It is triggered by weak attacks or strikes that you just slightly withstand. Light attacks have no knockback when the opponent is flying or performing a finishing move. The stagger knockback knocks you back a few feet, but you remain upright. Stagger attacks usually become knockdown assaults while in rage. Knockdown hits knock you on the ground, and you must lie down for a few moments before getting back up. Knockdown assaults usually become super knockdown attacks while in rage. Super knockdown launches you into the air and sends you flying hundreds of meters away. It only occurs when you are hit by a rage assault or a strong strike, which you are extremely vulnerable to. Null occurs when you are hit by a weak assault to which you are extremely resistant, resulting in very little damage and no reaction. Stun refers to any attack that renders a monster unable to attack for an extended period. Freeze tanks, Megalon's napalm, Mecha King Ghidorah's tasers, Orga's paralyzing goo, or having your foot smashed by a low strike can cause it. Monsters can become fatigued after carrying an opponent for an extended period, while Megalon can become tired after failing to snag someone with the burrow attack. You can't have defense without offense. All monsters have your main physical attacks. You can punch, kick, use a monster's unique fierce attack, and a rage attack. This can launch a devastating strike that impacts a spherical area around you. Using it removes you from the fury state. Each monster has a medium to long-range energy-based attack in the form of a beam or breath weapon. These attacks use energy, but their range and variety frequency surpasses the cost, making them essential components of any fighter's strategy. The beam usually targets the nearest adversary, although you may change the aim using the C-stick and auto-aim the airborne adversaries by holding the R button. Most monsters also have a powerful secondary fire that can be activated by tapping the Z button. It's worth noting you can't move or block while charging or launching a beam. Monsters can perform air attacks by pressing the X or A buttons when in the air because of jumping. By pressing Z, flying monsters can use their beam weapons in the air as well. Some monsters can use their tails or other weapons to attack adversaries who are immediately behind them. When knocked down on the ground, monsters can use the control stick or D-pad to roll about in a single direction, and or conduct get-up attacks with B or X buttons. Each one targets the three areas: the head, feet, or body. Regular blocking cancels out head and body assaults, whereas duck blocking cancels out body and foot attacks. Overhead attacks can land in any of the three zones, whereas uppercuts can land either in the head or body. Damage is classified into three types: blunt strikes, which produce a blue flash when they're connected, edged assaults, which produce a yellow flash, and energy-based attacks, which produce no flash effect. Some creatures are more vulnerable to one type of assault than another. Super knockdown and blocked attacks are represented by red and white flashes, respectively.
So not only does this game have a deep combat system, what I think made this game unique as well is the fact that there are power-ups in this game. This gave the fighting a unique edge to it.
Power-ups fall from the silver UFO that hovers above the battlefield every now and again. A bright Atari logo can be found hiding in a structure on occasion, only in the medium or hard difficulty setting though. Collecting the symbol allows you to access one item in the gallery mode. This power-up has the appearance of a yellow lightning bolt. It entirely replenishes your energy bar and causes it to refill 4 times faster for 25 seconds after you pick it up, though only for beam weapons. Energy lost to special moves such as flying still recharge at the same rate. This power-up has the appearance of a bright green cross and restores 45 hit points. For 25 seconds, this multicolored power-up enrages your monster. Enraged monsters deal 20% more damage and are more likely to knock an opponent down. They can also use their rage attack. It should be noted, however, that being frozen by a freeze tank causes you to exit rage early.
The game had a plethora of modes for you to choose from and get invested into. As the series would continue, they would expand on these modes for even more content. But for the first outing, really wasn't that bad.
In Adventure mode, you defeat the Vortak by fighting your way through the story. This acts as the traditional arcade ladder. Destruction mode is, well, what you expect. Destroy as much as you can. Whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins. Also, you can pick up and hurl buildings out of the area to get a couple more points. Destruction mode is only accessible in multiplayer form in the GameCube version, but it is playable in the single-player mode on the Xbox. The Gallery mode lets you examine the gallery items you earn by collecting Atari power-ups while playing the adventure game on normal or hard difficulty. Melee mode is your multiplayer match. Fights can be fought by up to 4 players. Survival is the traditional fight until you're defeated by other monsters. Between matches, your health is only minimally regenerated, and you have time restrictions to vanquish the monster before you lose. In a team battle mode, a melee in which up to 4 players fight in teams of 3. In versus, you can do a one-on-one battle between 2 players or between 1 player and a computer.
Now, you can't have a fighting game without some cool arenas to fight in. Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee consists of a lot of really cool arenas to fight in.
So in the game, you have the Boxing Arena, London, Los Angeles, Monster Island, Osaka, San Francisco, Seattle, Tokyo, and the Vortac Homeworld, and the Vortac Mothership. And some of these maps have different areas like North San Francisco and East San Francisco. The game, believe it or not, also featured some DLC content. This was only available for the Xbox version, however. For the Xbox version of the game, a DLC arena called Thrashburg was momentarily available for download through Xbox Live. However, because the original Xbox Live has now been decommissioned, there is no longer a means to obtain this map. One last amazing thing about the arenas is how each map has a day and night version.
Another great aspect of this game is its soundtrack. The music was composed by Jake Kaufman. I'll admit, the music isn't the best in the trilogy, but it does have good beats and it gets you really into the action. It fits the presentation of the game. A few of my favorite tracks are as follows. One of the last things I love about this game is the fact that it has cheat codes. You just don't get these fun kind of cheats anymore in video games, let alone fighting games.
To enter cheat codes, press and hold the L, B, and R buttons in that order, then release them in the B, R, L order. You use the D-pad to select the numbers and A to advance the next number. The following are a list of cheat codes. In the game, you get a black and white mode, you can play the game in Technicolor mode, you get 12 continues in adventure mode, you can pick a cheat code that makes monsters small, and you can also have invincibility, as well as 4 times the damage. You get a cheat that all buildings and objects become throwable. There's a cheat where all buildings become indestructible. There's a cheat where monsters are invisible. And there's also a cheat where everyone can be enraged for an unlimited amount of time. You can also turn the military on and off. And you can also have super energy where they have a limited amount of energy. Then you have cheats where you don't have any of the power-ups and no freeze tanks. And then there's also cheat codes to unlock everything. So for some fun trivia, this game was initially a GameCube exclusive. However, it was eventually ported to the Xbox, as we know. Backwards compatibility, though, allows the Xbox version to be played on the Xbox 360. The Heisei Mechagodzilla is portrayed as the only form of Mechagodzilla in the North American GameCube version of the game. Despite his powers and position in the table being more similar to Showa Mechagodzilla, the Heisei Mechagodzilla was replaced in the Japanese version of the game by Kiryu, the new Mechagodzilla from the newly released Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. The Heisei Mechagodzilla and Kiryu were later included in the North American Xbox release and were given the names Mechagodzilla 2 and Mechagodzilla 3. Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee was the first Godzilla video game to support 4 players. The Japanese GameCube version was built on top of the North American original. As a result, you may get the English version from a Japanese disc by using a region swap disc, such as Freeloader, or by patching the region code. However, this implies that the Japanese-only content, such as Mechagodzilla 3, will be inaccessible.
So as you can see, Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee came out swinging for a Godzilla game. All the aspects of this game are perfect in my opinion. And with a few more tweaks, we would get a sequel that would improve and expand on everything that this game started. But before we get to Save the Earth, we have to take a little pit stop and talk about the portable spin-off, Godzilla Domination. In the same year as Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee came out, we got Godzilla Domination on the GBA. It was developed by WayForward Technologies and still published by Atari. This was a little fun tie-in game compared to its bigger brother on the consoles, but to this day I still enjoy it from time to time. In terms of a plot, it's just as silly as any other Godzilla plot can be.
The story is as follows. Meteor X hovers over Tokyo and begins to project magnetic waves, inflicting neurological damage to some monsters and leading them to go insane. The monsters launch an attack on Earth and its satellite planets led by Mecha King Ghidorah. One creature, however, is untouched by the waves, and it's up to them to halt the other monsters and destroy Meteor X.
The gameplay is something that was completely overhauled compared to the console version. Instead of trying to squeeze everything that the console version did into a portable, they decided to give it more of a 2D beat-em-up style game.
The 8-level story mode concludes with a battle against a colossal Mecha King Ghidorah. You can play against up to 3 computer-controlled opponents in custom mode. The player has control over the monsters, arena, difficulty level, and teams. Versus mode allows 2 to 4 people to compete against each other using the Game Boy Advance game Link cable. The single pack option allows for multiplayer battles with a single Godzilla Domination cartridge, although players can only utilize Godzilla. There are 6 distinct monsters to choose from. Each character has a speed, power, and special rating. There are 7 arenas to choose from: Tokyo 2, Glacier, which has 2 variants, Nova, which has 2 variants as well, Meteor Z, and Moonbase. The Moonbase is renowned for its low gravity, which allows monsters to jump much higher.
Obviously, this is a smaller in scope game. The roster of characters is drastically reduced. And I'll say that most of the characters do feel a bit samey in this game, but that's not a huge issue, especially considering the hardware limitations.
The game features 6 playable characters. Mecha King Ghidorah is not a playable character, and in the Japanese version of the game, Mechagodzilla 2 is replaced with Kiryu, but has the same abilities. Interestingly enough, there are a lot of regional differences between versions. Rather than reusing the box art from Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, the Japanese box art has a fresh artwork depicting the game's cast of kaiju rendered in a super deformed or chibi manner. The box image notably shows Godzilla, Mothra, and Kiryu, with other monsters in the background, as the game was published around the same time as Godzilla Tokyo SOS in Japan. A special edition of the game was released that featured semi-transparent replicas of Bandai's Kaiju-O Kuboru sets, Godzilla, Mothra, and Kiryu figure puppets. The Japanese version of Godzilla is based on his design from Godzilla Tokyo SOS, with gray skin and a big scar on his chest, rather than being the bright green color used in the American version. For the Japanese version of Godzilla Tokyo SOS, it was decided to replace the Heisei Mechagodzilla with the Millennium version of the character, Kiryu, in order to capitalize on the approaching release of Godzilla Tokyo SOS. Kiryu is based on his modified Type 3 Kiryu design, and even has the drill hand from that version. Mothra's look is more closely modeled after her design in Godzilla Tokyo SOS, similar to what was done with Godzilla Mechagodzilla, whereas Mothra's appearance in the US version is somewhat modeled after her 2001 design. Mothra's wings have been modified from white to pale earthly green. For her in-game artwork, Mothra's eyes shift hue from deep purple to light blue, more appropriately reflecting her film's appearance, albeit they remain purple on her sprite. In addition, her poison powder assault has been modified from a vivid purple to a soft earthy blue in the Japanese version. The Japanese story mode offers 3 modes of play: Default, Survival, and Rage, and is considered the most exciting update in the game. The purpose of Survival is to put one's endurance and lifespan to the test in warfare. The player is stripped of continues and cannot refill their health. Each monster's wrath meter fills up quickly in Rage, allowing them to use their special powers repeatedly and in fast succession. This offers players who use Rodan and Megalon a huge edge, as the attacks they can unleash with the full Fury meter are by far the most powerful in the game. The sequence of fight configuration in the Japanese edition was juggled quite a bit. The second stage is a 1-on-1 match, rather than a 2-on-2 match. The third stage is a 2-on-2 match, rather than a 1-on-1 match. The fourth stage is a 3-monster free-for-all, rather than a 2-on-2. The fifth stage is a 4-monster free-for-all, rather than a 1-on-3. The sixth stage is a 1-on-3 match, instead of 4-monster free-for-all. Furthermore, the additional stages from the American edition have been eliminated, substantially shortening the time it takes to reach Mecha King Ghidorah. And enemy/ally monsters in the Japanese version are fully chosen at random.
The game's controls are also a lot more simplified. This due again to hardware limitations. Still, the game plays really well, and once you get a handle on how the game controls and plays, you can dominate the enemy.
The game has basic attacks consisting of high and low. There are also aerial moves that can be performed. Each character has a special move that can be performed by holding A or B until the character is flashing. When you release the button, you release your special. Rage attacks are also in the game as well. Each monster has an attack that consumes 1, 2, or 3 rage bars, respectively. There is no link between button combinations and the number of bars used in an attack. Megalon's LNR strike, for example, depletes his full fury meter, but Godzilla requires only 1 bar.
The soundtrack to the game was still composed by Jake Kaufman, and this soundtrack is amazing. I wish there was a non-compressed version of these tracks, because man, these tracks are just so fire. And they're very tonally different from the console version. These have a more techno-ish, faster beat to them. A few of my favorite tracks are as follows. Before we end, we also have some interesting trivia. Thanks once again to Wikizilla for this.
With the exception of Megalon, all of Toho's big 5 kaiju are playable in Godzilla Domination: Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla. The cover art for the game is identical to that of Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee in the United States. The European cover art for this game also reuses the European box art for Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee, which includes images of Gigan and Anguirus, both of whom are absent from Godzilla Domination. In this game, Rodan has the capacity to spit a cloud of deadly gas from his mouth, which he has never displayed before or since. Jake Kaufman, a well-known video game composer who worked on DuckTales Remastered, the Shantae series, Red Faction Guerrilla, Contra 4, and Shovel Knight, provided the game's soundtrack.
Godzilla Domination is a very good experience for a handheld console. It's not the best overall, but for what it is, it's a good time. So that's it for the first part, guys. Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee and Domination would be the first step into Godzilla getting into really top-notch gaming here, and proving that the King of the Monsters can have a quality video game. And how would the devs improve from here? Well, getting ready for the 50th anniversary of Godzilla at the time, the devs had their work cut out for them. How would they fare? And let's find out when we move to the highly regarded Godzilla Save the Earth. After the success of Destroy Monsters Melee, the team got back to work right away on a sequel. This would be important as the franchise at the time was going to be turning 50, and Toho was going to pull out all the stops. Massive merchandising for figures, including the 50th anniversary memorial box, a soundtrack collection that housed every single soundtrack of all the Godzilla movies, and a new film that was supposed to really end the series as a whole. And last but not least, of course, a video game tie-in. Yes, the game that many people will say is the best out of the trilogy. I am talking about Godzilla Save the Earth. I too, like many others, love this game. It took everything that Destroy Monsters did and almost improved on every aspect. I still prefer Destroy Monsters Melee, but Save the Earth is just as high on my list.
Godzilla Save the Earth is a fighting game developed by Pipeworks and distributed by Atari that is a sequel to the 2002 game Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee. The PlayStation 2 version was published on November 2nd, 2004 in North America, on November 9th, 2004 in the PAL Zone, and on December 10th, 2004 in Japan. The Xbox version was released on November 16, 2004 in North America and November 19, 2004 in the PAL zone.
The story mode for the game would kind of continue the story from Destroy Monsters Melee, but you didn't really need to know the details of the last game to understand what's going on in this one. As like the last game, the story is not super important, but it did seem to take itself a little bit more serious with this game. The tone seemed to be a little bit more darker.
After failing to attack Earth, the Vortak return 2 years later with all the monsters they can control, as well as their greatest weapon, Space Godzilla. Regardless of which monster is chosen, the player assumes the role of a monster who has escaped control. The Vortak infiltrated human culture to steal G-cells in the original plot, which was significantly more intricate during production.
The game brought back many modes from the previous game and expanded them and also added some new ones. There's still a ton of content packed into this game, and it'll have you playing for hours.
The primary story mode of the game is Action Mode. The player chooses a monster to play as and must fight their way through various stages, each with an enemy monster. The player will occasionally find Challenge Mode stages, which grant bonus points if finished, but are not required to advance the story. The player will eventually reach the final stage, the Vortak Mothership, which usually contains Orga as the ultimate opponent. If the player beats Action Mode on hard using Godzilla 2000, a cutscene depicting Space Godzilla's shoulder crystals exploding in the middle of a canyon will play. The broken pieces then temporarily combine into a miniature black hole, sucking Space Godzilla in before the black hole fades away. Godzilla roars triumphantly, and the Vortak retreat to Earth. Challenge Mode is a secondary game mode consisting of special levels in which the player must perform a mission. These stages, unlike Action Mode stages, are not all dependent on fighting the opponent monster and may contain up to 4 different monsters at the same time. When playing in Action Mode, the player will periodically reach a Challenge Mode level, which when completed unlocks it for play in the Challenge Mode menu. If a player successfully completes a Challenge Mode stage, they will receive points to spend in-game. When these stages are encountered in Action Game, the player will control whichever monster they are currently using for the rest of the mode, whereas if they are selected individually in the Challenge Mode menu, the player will play as Godzilla 2000. The lone exception is the Asteroid Field task, in which the player takes on a role of Mogira. This mode is notable for including boss monsters that are not playable in the game, such as Ibra, the Millennium, and Space Godzilla's flying form. The following are the numerous challenges and their in-game descriptions. Asteroid Field. As Mogira, patrol the asteroid field and destroy as many alien vehicles as possible, then you defeat the boss. In Battleships, you destroy battleships for points. You earn 5,000 points before time is up. In Clone Attack, he's been cloned. Destroy him and his clone before they can destroy you. In Demolition, you have to earn 15,000 destruction points before the timer runs out. In Monster Bowling, you knock down all opponents by throwing rocks at them before the timer runs out. In Monster Roundup, you throw 3 monsters into 3 separate pens before time is ran out. In the Mothership, you defeat Orga's 3 stages and escape the alien mothership. In Osaka Crunch, you destroy 70% of the city before the timer runs out. In Replicator, you defeat Mecha King Ghidorah and his clones. In the UFO attack mission, you destroy the UFOs before they destroy the pyramid building. In Undersea Battle, you swim to the bottom of the ocean to find and destroy the Vortak's hammer sub. In Beryllium Basketball, you make as many baskets as you can in 3 minutes. The monster with the most points wins. Versus Mode is a gaming mode in which the player can engage in a one-on-one battle as and against the monster of their choice. The user will have access to all monsters and stages that they have previously unlocked. Each battle's time restriction and number of rounds are adjustable. This mode can be played against either the AI or a human opponent. Melee Mode, like Versus Mode, allows the player to create custom battles with monsters and stages of their choice. Melee Mode, on the other hand, allows you to include up to 4 monsters. The player can pick whether the match will be free-for-all or a team battle, and whether it will be decided to be knockout, combat points, or destruction points. The destruction option is akin to Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee's Destruction Mode, in which the player competes against other monsters to score the most points. This mode, like Versus Mode, can be played with 1 or 2 players. Survival Mode is a single-player, single-stage, of the player's choosing, gaming mode in which the player must fight as many opponents as possible before the health of the monster is fully depleted. Each opponent must be defeated within 3 minutes or the match is automatically forfeited. The player's score is determined by how many monsters are defeated in a row and how quickly they are defeated. After certain matches, the player's monster's health bar is partially replenished. However, the amount of health received gradually diminishes as one advances.
This time around, unlocking things would be a bit different. Instead of unlocking monsters and stages by playing the adventure mode, or by finding gallery items by finding the Atari symbol by destroyed buildings, there is actually a point system in Save the Earth. The point system is a currency that you will gather while playing through the game. This will allow you to unlock characters, arenas, gallery items, all that kind of stuff.
This menu allows the player to store and use points earned in other game modes to acquire new playable monsters, stages for versus and melee modes, gallery items, or Godzilla Final Wars stills and concept art. This menu contains a range of things packed in packaging with question marks icon in green, yellow, and red. Purchasing a pack grants the player access to single pre-selected characters or stages, with the opportunity to purchase more character or stages in the pack at a later date. The gallery mode is back with even more cool concept art and production images. Next to this, though, is the Final Wars collection. Since this game was releasing the same year as Godzilla Final Wars, the devs put a lot of cool concept and production images into the game, and that would need to be unlocked.
The game's roster of monsters have been expanded and also been improved on from the last game. Now almost doubling the size that Destroy All Monsters Melee was, all monsters are unique in their own way. There are no cloned characters in this game.
Godzilla Save the Earth contains a total of 19 playable monsters, 6 of which are available from the start and the other 13 of which must be unlocked by purchasing monster packages. The game's roster contains Anguirus, Baragon, Destroya, Gigan, Godzilla 2000, Godzilla 90s, Jet Jaguar, King Ghidorah, Mecha King Ghidorah, Mecha Godzilla 2, Kiryu, Megaguirus, Megalon, Mogira, Mothra, Orga, Rodan, and Space Godzilla. Another addition to this game is that each playable monster has 4 different colors to choose from. These are only visible in melee mode when numerous players choose the same character though. Player 1 will be blue, player 2 will be green, player 3 will be orange, and the player 4 will be red. The monsters that are unplayable but make an appearance are Batra, who replaces Mothra with the Airstrike power-up, Biollante, which is technically in the game's code, but not available to play as, although thanks to the modding community, players have found a way to play as Biollante. Ibra, who appears as a boss fight in the challenge mode Underseas Battle Mission, Meganula, which is shown in Megaguirus' Rage Attack, Millennium, who appears as a boss fight in the challenge mode Mothership Mission, and Space Godzilla's flying form, who is the boss in the challenge mode mission Asteroid Field. Along with monsters who are unplayable, just like Destroy All Monsters Melee, there were many scrapped or unused monsters for the game. Batra was supposed to be playable after the Super X3, but it ended up being an airstrike. Batra was made playable in the PlayStation 2 edition of Godzilla Unleashed, the game's sequel. Biollante fell behind schedule, and as a result, Atari was unable to obtain the license in time, even though it was eventually completed and is still there in the game's code. Biollante is the only monster in any of the Atari Pipeworks Godzilla games that was fully finished but not included in the final game. Hackers using the PlayStation 2 emulator PCSX2 were able to retrieve Biollante's data and make her playable in 2014. She later appeared as a playable character in Godzilla Unleashed for the Wii. Mogira was supposed to be able to convert into Star Falcon as an additional mode. Although it's not playable, its model can be obtained by hacking. It's unknown whether Land Mogira would have been included, or how the vehicle would have been handled. Godzilla 1954 was supposed to be a secret character, but it didn't make the cut due to the existence of 2 other Godzillas. He later appeared as a playable character in Godzilla Unleashed for the Wii. Due to the restrictions of the consoles, Hedorah was highly considered, but was not included. Due to the presence of 2 other incarnations of Mechagodzilla, Showa Mechagodzilla was meant to be a secret character, but did not make the cut. It was eventually included as a playable character for the Wii edition of Godzilla Unleashed, along with many other unused combatants from Godzilla Save the Earth. Rainbow Mothra appears on the game's box image, however this is likely an art error. During an interview for Godzilla Unleashed, Simon Strange stated that the rebirth of Mothra characters would not be permitted because Toho considered it a separate series. According to Simon Strange, Super Mechagodzilla was also proposed. Titanosaurus was depicted in concept art for the game and according to Simon Strange was intended to be a warrior. He later appeared as a playable character in Godzilla Unleashed. Varen was not considered directly, but according to Simon Strange, he would have been their next choice. He was later made playable in Godzilla Unleashed.
Even though this time around the soundtrack was made by a different composer, the music still is amazing. One thing that I noticed with this game is that the music seems to have a heavier tone to it, and the music seems to have a slower tempo in some of the pieces. I do like Melee's soundtrack a little more, but Save the Earth is still pretty much up there.
The in-game soundtrack for Godzilla Save the Earth was composed by Ron Fish. The soundtrack has never been officially released separately from the game.
With the new characters, also came new arenas to fight in. Some cities return, but are also reworked, and they did away with certain sections of the arenas like before. Now every arena counted as one area.
The game features a total of 16 different fighting stages, including 9 standard size arenas and 7 smaller sub-arena variations. Most of the stages in the game have options for switching between day and night settings. In the game we have Boston, the boxing ring that makes a return, Los Angeles, London, Monster Island, Mothership, New York, Osaka, San Francisco, and Tokyo. There were also scrapped arenas for the game. 2 pieces of concept art depict a battle between Titanosaurus and other monsters on an ice level in Antarctica. The second gives a description of the level's gameplay. It depicts Godzilla 2000 collapsing into an ice flow while Mechagodzilla 3 looks on. It says, "Ice flow dangers can cause monsters to fall. They will reappear in the arena's ocean segment." The city of Las Vegas can be seen in the game's concept art. Godzilla 90s is depicted holding the Hard Rock Hotel's guitar, ready to use it against Mecha King Ghidorah. There was also a Rodan Challenge Mode rail shooter level that have been shown in concept art. It was to function similarly to Godzilla 2000 and Moguera, except this time it's in a desert setting. The statue level, which was briefly detailed in an interview and depicted in concept art. This would have featured fighting Destroya while attempting to activate a Jet Jaguar statue. A Mount Fuji level was meant to serve as the last arena for story mode, where the player would face off against various monsters before facing off against Space Godzilla. Many of the original game elements were dropped during development owing to a combination of time restrictions and license concerns. This could be because Atari rushed the game to coincide with the release of Godzilla Final Wars in 2004. Despite being fully developed, Biollante was cancelled before release, and the majority of the game's story was eliminated, even though a significant amount of time was spent on the story mode. Godzilla Save the Earth, according to Simon Strange, was not a feel-good production like Destroy All Monsters Melee was. Here's some cool trivia provided by Wikizilla. The Japanese box cover for this game depicts the 2001 versions of King Ghidorah and Mothra. However, the North American box art depicts Rainbow Mothra and Mecha King Ghidorah with biological heads resembling the Showa King Ghidorah. When Anguirus' roar was fully charged, it produced a sort of shockwave effect. Because the waves were not drawn accurately from all angles, they were cut. The Xbox version is still playable on the 360 thanks to backwards compatibility.
An interesting fact is that Save the Earth actually didn't get a portable tie-in spin-off, but the game was a major improvement compared to Melee, and it's still beloved by many fans. Even to this day, this game is still being played at tournaments at G-Fest during every summer. After this success, you'd think that a third game would be a home run and an easy win for them. They would continue to improve and expand on the games that came before, right? And we'll dive into the final entry into this trilogy, with Godzilla Unleashed. Before we get to the final game in the trilogy, I would like to take a quick detour into the tie-in spin-off portable game, Godzilla Unleashed Double Smash. Like Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee getting Domination as a portable spin-off, Unleashed as well got its portable spin-off. This makes Save the Earth the only game out of the trilogy that didn't get some kind of spin-off. I personally don't favor this game too much. In my opinion, it's kind of the weakest game in the series. There isn't too much to delve in here, but let's take a quick look.
Godzilla Unleashed Double Smash is a video game released in 2007 for the Nintendo DS alongside Godzilla Unleashed on the Wii. Godzilla Unleashed Double Smash is a two-dimensional side-scrolling platformer. The player controls two monsters, one that flies on the top screen and another that wanders on the ground on the bottom screen. The game is 2.5D and progresses slowly to the level's end. During gaming, the player is confronted with small hurdles such as human soldiers, flying crystals, and buildings. When the player encounters a crystal or a building, they must perform a combo to demolish it. Monsters have high and low strikes, as well as a beam weapon. If the blue bar on the screen is full, the player can launch a surge attack that destroys all foes on screen, except for Destroya. All of the game bosses are unplayable. Every stage in the game contains two adversary monsters, a mini-boss in the midst of the stage and a final boss at the end. The game cannot be saved while in a narrative mode, and the player must complete the plot in a single playthrough.
I was never fond of the gameplay. It was way too repetitive for my taste. I'm also not a major fan of the art style, but due to the limitations of the Nintendo DS, I can understand why they went this route.
The playable characters in the game are Godzilla, Gigan, Megalon, Crystalac, and Anguirus. Those are the ground characters. And then for the flying characters, you get to play as Mothra, King Ghidorah, Rodan, Batra, and Destroya.
In terms of modes, the game really didn't have that much to offer, only having 3 major modes of play.
Of the 3 game modes, 2 must be unlocked by completing the game for the first time. Story mode is the sole mode available at the start of the game. Players will be able to combat many monsters, foes, and so on, as well as they learn the backstory of the final boss, Space Godzilla. Players will also be able to unlock concept art for the creatures they have faced, as well as the opponents they have defeated. By obtaining a B, S, or A rank, players can acquire 3D models and concept art of the various stages by playing Endurance mode. Survival mode concentrates on a single stage. If players defeat the stage's final boss and earn an A or S rank, they can unlock monster biographies and hacks that can be utilized to complete the game.
That's really all there is to the game. The music, however, I would consider to be another smash hit. The in-game soundtrack for Godzilla Unleashed was composed by Matthew E. Harwood. The soundtrack has never been separately released from the game. Here are some of my few favorite tracks. How about some fun trivia facts?
IGN gave Godzilla Unleashed Double Smash a rating of 3.0, calling it one of the worst DS games. Manda, Ibra, Mecha King Ghidorah, and Biollante are among the game's bosses who are significantly larger than their movie counterparts. In the game, the Sphinx is also much larger than it is in real life. Godzilla's design in the game is a combination of his Heisei and Millennium versions. This game has more monsters than Godzilla Unleashed for the Wii. According to the game's monster database, Titanosaurus seemed to have initially appeared in the 1957 film The Mysterians. In terms of design and story role, the Mechagodzilla presented in the game mostly closely resembles Kiryu, yet its entry in the Monster Manifest describes it as the Showa Mechagodzilla. A white gorilla model can be discovered in the game's data files.
Now that we covered that, it's time to get to the main attraction, the Godzilla game to end all Godzilla games. A game that the devs were super ambitious about. Was it a bit too ambitious though? Would this game go down in history to be the definitive Godzilla game? And a perfect way to send off this trilogy? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's look at the infamous Godzilla Unleashed. I remember seeing this game for the first time on an IGN video. It was the first teaser of gameplay. I was so hyped for this game back in 2006. This game was supposed to be the biggest Godzilla game yet. And it would be the first game on next-gen hardware, on the Nintendo Wii. I remember being glued to the Godzilla Unleashed website every day after school, seeing if any little new update would be added to the website. The day it was released, I was stoked, and I did enjoy it, but over time, my enjoyment of the game has kinda dwindled over the years, due to some questionable design choices. Let's go deeper and see why people praise this game as being the best, and why some, including myself, think it's the weakest in the trilogy.
Godzilla Unleashed is a video game released by Atari for the Nintendo Wii and Sony PlayStation 2. It was developed by Pipeworks and distributed by Atari. It is the third and final installment of the Pipeworks Godzilla video game trilogy, following Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee and Godzilla Save the Earth. On December 5th, 2007, it was released. A PSP version was planned, however it was abandoned in favor of a PlayStation 2 version midway through production. The Wii version has approximately 26 playable monsters, whereas the PS2 version only has 20, removing all new monsters except Obsidious, and including Batra as an exclusive in addition to the Showa versions of Gigan.
The gameplay had a major change compared to the previous two games, at least on the Wii. This is by far the main reason why a lot of fans are split on this game. The PS2 port, on the other hand, basically had the same style as Save the Earth.
The main change is the Wii itself. Being on this new technology, the devs wanted to utilize the new motion controls. This dramatically changed the way the game felt and played. You would press buttons on the Wiimote and nunchuck and then swipe the controller in any direction to perform an attack. This would make the game have the slowest feel in the whole trilogy. Sometimes the move would work and other times it wouldn't register. This would prove frustrating to some players, including myself. A new feature has been added to the Wii version of Godzilla Unleashed, which is Critical Mass, the game's counterpart of Rage in the previous games. Monsters have access to critical mass by breaking the crystals distributed across the stages and filling the critical meter. It enters an excited condition in which all damage delivered and received increases the critical meter. The monster enters critical mass when the critical meter is full. During critical mass, the monsters' bodies grow and become covered in bright red lights, eerily similar to Godzilla vs. Destoroyah's Burning Godzilla. They deal a lot more damage at the expense of their defense. When the monster quits critical mass, one cell of its HP is depleted as punishment for using critical mass, unless the cell is the final one. Godzilla Unleashed also replaces the previous game's rage attacks with power surges, which are super powerful attacks and abilities that can only be utilized once per battle. These are earned in single-player mode and cannot be used in multiplayer unless they are unlocked in single-player mode. During the game's story mode, the player will come across monsters who have been endowed with odd abilities by the crystals. The player's monster has two options: beat the monster and earn that power for itself, or destroy the crystals and free the monster. When the surge wears off, the player can deactivate it with a nuclear pulse like a shockwave. A single monster can have multiple power surges. The radiation surge, for example, enables the nuclear pulse rage attack. The fire surge enables the finishing breath rage attack, and the dark surge, which offers immunity to all ranged assault. Initially, it was thought that the surges were monster specific, but after the game's release, it was found that the surges are available to all monsters. Critical mass is known as the power surge in the PS2 version of the game, and power surge assault are simply known as surges. Surge attacks in the PS2 version also do not activate rage attacks, instead emitting minor shockwaves with their own effect. Military presence is represented in the game via numerous vehicles displayed on the outskirts of the battle. The player can alter the degree of military presence in the stages by using the slider options in the menu. These vehicles assault the monster that is the most dangerous to the city. The Gatango, or Atragon in the game, is a boss battleship. General Gaisen, the Atragon's pilot, is driven insane by the hate of monsters and radiation from the crystals. The Vortak have a military force composed of walkers and UFOs. The battle system was also tweaked for the Wii version. The PS2 version retains the previous health and energy meter system. However, the Wii version incorporates a cell system. Each monster has a set number of health cells. The default is 5. Larger monsters such as King Ghidorah, Space Godzilla, and Biollante have 6 cells, while the smaller monsters like Fire Rodan, Baragon, and Moguera have 4. Regardless of the difficulty level, Titanosaurus will always have 5 cells in story mode. When the health bar is emitted, a cell dies, and the next cell replaces it. The monster will be knocked out after the last cell is drained. The new cells are also used in the energy system, with the default beginning amount being 2 cells. Jet Jaguar starts with 4 to compensate for the weakness of his beam. Except for Mechagodzilla and Mechagodzilla 2, beam weapons can no longer be utilized to KO monsters. Holding C or Z and C if a cell is already present will charge it. Baragon charges his energy simply by being in contact with the ground, while Moguera automatically charges slowly. but this can be sped up using a move that has Mogera shut down to recharge.
The story mode for this game was very ambitious. It had a more in-depth storyline with actual characters, like an actual cast in the game. It had sort of a choose your own path or kind of a non-linear way of going through the missions. And you could tackle which missions you wanted to choose at any point, and you can also decide to join a certain monster or attack them. The game had a big emphasis on factions. We'll get to the factions later, but I feel that there was a lot to be desired with this campaign. I think given more time, the devs could have made a lot more in this campaign and made it one hell of an experience.
Godzilla Unleashed's plot opens with a meteor shower showering down on Earth, causing climate upheavals and earthquakes. Simultaneously, as a result of crystals forming on the ground, the monsters of Earth begin to attack cities all across the world. Factions arise among Earth's creatures as well as the monsters that attack them, resulting in 4 monster factions. Later events, particularly the relationships between the factions, are influenced by choices made within the story. The Vortak, who have returned from earlier games, decide to invade and take Earth using the crystals, but their mothership is knocked down into San Francisco Bay. The source of the crystals is revealed in the finale to be Space Godzilla, who is attempting to infiltrate New York through a wormhole. There are 3 endings based on the factions. If an alien wins, Vorticia laughs in triumph. If a mutant wins or obtains all the power surges, the crystals expand at a cancerous rate and the player's monster takes over the globe. If the Global Defense Force, or Earth Defenders, triumph, the player's monster is praised for its valor and the world returns to normal. Although when playing as an alien or mutant, the player can turn against their group and align with the Earth Defenders of the GDF's monsters. There are no endings in which an alien or mutant saves Earth.
Like I said before, the game actually had a cast of characters to follow throughout the story.
Base Commander Takagi oversees assessing situations and directing the GDF's mecha forces into action. In tumultuous situations, he is the calm head, always keeping his emotions in check. He is Miku's boss. Specialist Kenji Miku is one of many GDF's technicians responsible for monitoring the worldwide defense grid and all monster activity. She reports directly to Commander Takagi, her superior. Miku believes that Earth's monsters are heroic defenders of the planet who rage only when their precious home is threatened by human arrogance or otherworldly forces. General Gaizen is a semi-retired, hardcore military man who serves on the GDF Council as a military advisor. As the commander of the Atragon, he has lost many encounters against Godzilla over his career. As a result, he harbors a profound aversion to all monsters. Despite the fact that he is no longer in active charge, his bombastic, demeanoring personality wields enormous sway inside the council. He found one of the crystals, which has significant impact on his sanity, causing him to fight whichever monster the player uses twice and escape the first time. Gaizen begins to question his reckless attacks on the monsters and the impact of the crystals before the second encounter. But his anger triumphs and he strikes the player for a second time, culminating to his death where the monster destroys the Atragon. Interestingly, none of Gaizen levels appears in the GDF tale, most likely because Gaizen would never deliberately target a GDF mecha unit. Dr. Shiragami, a brilliant GDF scientist and the world's leading specialist on enormous monsters, makes some fascinating discoveries of the nature of the crystal's formations and the alien radiation they emit. General Gaizen instructs him to build a bioagent to eradicate the monsters, but Gaizen mocks him, referring to his efforts as biolots. Shiragami's efforts with anti-monster mutagens result in the development of Biolante. Shiragami later interrupts the council meeting to deliver his findings on critical mass, as well as to notify the council on Earth's actions about crystals, having somehow survived his confrontation with the beast.
The best thing about this game is the number of monsters that are available to play. Every monster from the previous game is in this game, and they add a bunch more, at least on the Wii version. The PS2 version didn't really add a lot more characters. Really, the only one exception would be Batra as an exclusive on the PS2. The other big change is that now every character is a part of a faction. Another thing I really liked about the game is that the devs gave each monster kind of their own personality in this game, and also the way that they play. It gives the game a little bit more depth than the previous titles.
Earth Defenders tolerate humans, but make little effort to defend them. They consider the crystals as a scourge on the Earth, and their primary purpose is to eliminate them. They defend the globe and their home, Monster Island, against any foreign danger. Godzilla is one of the most powerful monsters. His famed atomic breath delivers a lot of damage, but unlike most Earth native kaiju, he does not believe humanity is worth preserving and is considered exceedingly deadly. He has a fantastic sixth sense that alerts him to where he has to go. Both Godzilla 1954 and Godzilla 1990s appears as secret characters in the game. In the model, they are identical from the neck down, but do have distinct skins, heads, atomic breath colors, dorsal fins, and sound files. They are not playable in the Wii version story mode, however. Godzilla 1990s is playable in the PlayStation 2 version story mode. Godzilla 1954 is only available for the Wii version of the game. Anguirus is a devoted Earth Defender and Godzilla's ally, along with his thick spikes, which can sometimes backfire adversaries' strikes and give him the advantage. He can roll into a ball as an ability attack, and he also has been granted Sonic Scream, which can blow away his opponents. And he has the rage to reverberate over buildings and rocks. Anguirus is the only creature who cannot engage in beam locks in the Wii version of the game. Fire Rodan is a prehistoric monster with a penchant for fire that rules the skies and is the only defender who can employ his beam while in the air. He is impervious to numerous heat strikes and uses wind power to force his opponents to retreat to a short distance. To oppose attack, he can also soar high above his opponents. Despite his name being Fire Rodan in the game, he is still referred to as Rodan by GDF Communications. Mothra is a beneficent Earth Defender who actively defends humanity from a variety of perils. She begins as a larva and spits out silk to paralyze her adversaries. She also has a stinger on her tail that she can use to attack. When her health is low, or if the player wishes, she cocoons herself into Amigo form and emerges with full health and ability to block range attacks. Baragon is one of Earth Defender's tiniest members, yet he has tremendous martial-like techniques that allow him to win the majority of the time. He is a burrower that frequently uses tunneling talents to sneak up on opponents or flee in danger. He also has Fire Breath, which charges whenever he comes into touching with the ground. King Caesar is a spiritual Earth Defender, with a human heart who can use human-like fighting methods and fire beams from his eyes. He goes out of his way to defend humanity, unlike most Earth Defenders. He's only available on the Wii version. Varan has the capacity to glide with membranes or skin folds under his arms. He is given a ranged green sonic beam, and while his ordinary toothed claw strikes aren't strongest, his ferocious assaults are lethal. Varan is only available on the Wii version. The Global Defense Force has constructed a large number of mechs to defend Earth, which were previously operated by people but are now driven by electric autonomous brains, making them vulnerable to crystals. Even though they want to defend humanity, their actions are questionable, with their commanders being insane and fearful of any kaiju, good or bad, destroying their own towns. Mogira was the GDF's initial effort at a monster fighting mech. While effective, Mogira was deemed too feeble and is now primarily used as long-range fire support for other mechs, employing long-range missiles and other weapons. He has an effective auto-targeting mechanism. Mogira, although being in a fire support function, may use melee attacks. Mechagodzilla 2 was inspired directly by the Vortex Mechagodzilla, with a focus on defense over offense and the expense of mobility. Mechagodzilla 2 is still a mainstay of the GDF battle force, with the exception of the ability to fly and the plasma grenade. He plays essentially identically to the Vortex Mechagodzilla. Unlike other monsters, his beam weapon may truly knock out health cells and even KO opponents in this manner. Kiryu is a genetically identical cyborg to Godzilla, who acts as humanity's primary protector against alien invasions and monster attacks. To face Space Godzilla and other dangerous species, Kiryu will need to unleash his entire fighting capabilities. Since he has never fought before, he is a well-rounded combatant with great hand-to-hand skills, missiles, an oral maser cannon, and the ability to fly. Jet Jaguar is a reserve member of the GDF who was created by a Japanese scientist named Goro Ibuki for unknown reasons. He fights in the martial arts style and has the ability to fire plasma beams from his hands. His most unusual skill is the capacity to temporarily change size. While he is usually around Godzilla's height, he may shrink to be much smaller, making him tougher to hit and impervious to beam attacks, or much larger, allowing him to easily knock foes off their feet at the expense of speed. Mecha King Ghidorah is a monster from a conceivable future, the consequence of humanity uniting their technology with Vortex King Ghidorah. He is nearly identical to King Ghidorah in terms of gameplay. He has a different skin and supports humans rather than the Vortex. He possesses rechargeable tasers as well as a force field that absorbs opponents' energy strikes. Vorticia, Queen of the Vortex, commands these alien beasts. Their main purpose is to conquer Earth by gathering all of the power surges to aid their lord's invasion. To achieve their goal, they are willing to destroy both humans and kaiju from the opposing groups, and with the help of the Vortex military, they are prepared to crush any resistance from the planet. Gigan is the Vortex invasion force's hammer, freshly improved to be more powerful than ever before. He is the Vortex's finest combat force, capable of projecting tremendous alien energy from his single eye to confront adversaries at a distance and slice them up close with his scythe-like hands and belly buzzsaws. Gigan has his show appearance in the PS2 version, but he has the updated Millennium design from Godzilla Final Wars in the Wii version. King Ghidorah is Godzilla's arch-nemesis and the game's most physically strong monster. Vorticia chooses him to receive the power surges. causing him to quadruple in size throughout one level. The Wii version combines Millennium and Heisei designs, whereas the PS2 version combines Showa and Heisei design. Mechagodzilla is a robotic Godzilla used by the Vortak during one of their earlier invasions. He is a powerful powerhouse with ranged arsenal and sheer strength, as well as several abilities such as I-beams and a shield, a fire ray, and finger missiles, and he is still known on the Vortak's roster. Unlike other monsters, he can use his beam weapon to knock out health cells and even KO monsters. He is only available on the Wii version. Megalon is an insect adored by the subterranean Seatopians, who have loaned it to their close companions, the Vortak. Megalon is a powerful being, capable of burrowing and reappearing with his drill hands, frequently seizing and flinging down foes. He possesses a high affinity for electricity, as evidenced by his resistance against electric-based attacks and the ability to project electromagnetic energy from his hands and horn. Megalon, a veteran of the extraterrestrial battle force, is frequently teamed with Gigan. Orga is the result of an advanced biospaceship sent by an unknown extraterrestrial power that mutated in order to confront Earth monsters, and he has subsequently lent his services to the Vortak after being beaten by Godzilla. Orga has a powerful beam weapon and is nonetheless a formidable force to be reckoned with, despite being valued for his might and his physical strength rather than his intelligence. Mutants have a lust for power that comes before other concerns, all working for their own sinister agenda, to destroy everything in their path. The mutants seek to increase their own power by collecting power surges, and if unchecked, could destroy human civilization. Batra is the yin to Mothra's yang. He is the Earth's protector, whereas Mothra is the human guardian, but Batra has a tendency to go too far and wreak more death and damage than is necessary. Batra possesses all of Mothra's skills. In reality, he is a reskin of Mothra. He is the only monster that is exclusive to the PS2 version. Dr. Shiragami accidentally created Biollante during his anti-monster mutagen studies. Under General Gaizen's orders, the Doctor combined Godzilla's G-cells with a foam compound in Tokyo, but they united and became Biollante. The gigantic plant monster moves slowly, yet she may burrow and resurface whenever she wants. She is the game's largest monster, attacking from a distance with her stretching, gaping vines and caustic sap spray sprayed from her mouth. She may also be lethal up close, biting opponents' monsters with her massive jaw. She is only available in the Wii version. Biollante appears to be using recycled data from Godzilla Save the Earth. Destroya is the nihilistic manifestation of death, who desires to annihilate all life forms. He can concentrate energy from his horn and utilize it as a sword to sever all opponents. Unlike in previous games, his horn katana does not consume energy and can be used as often as the player wants. As a result, he is an unbalanced character who can easily win battles with this strike alone. Destroya can also attack with his clawed hands and forked tail, and his wings allow him to jump higher. Crystalac is a new character in the game. He is a semi-sentient, crystal-created creature. His sole goal is to amass all known power surges and become the most powerful creature on the planet. Crystalac's crystal hide protects him from most weapons, and he may overload his crystal heart to cause a massive explosion. He is only available in the Wii version. Megaguirus is a massive prehistoric dragonfly and the queen of a massive swarm of Meganula. She grew to enormous size as her swarm siphoned Godzilla's atomic energy and transferred it to her. Megaguirus may absorb opponents' energy and release it in form of an energy discharge, or a copy of the monster's own beam. When Megaguirus has more than one energy cell and fires, the following cell is not depleted, allowing the beam to be fired forever. If the beam was stolen from Mechagodzilla or Mechagodzilla 2, the player can eliminate any monster in range. Obsidius is yet another new character added to the game as a result of fan voting in June 2007. Obsidius, who was brought to life by the power of the crystals and the raw, ferocious material beneath the Earth's crust, pursues power surges and critical mass for his own power. He can split molten lava from his mouth and has a strong hand-to-hand combat ability. In the PS2 version, he mimics Orga's moveset. However, in the Wii version, he has his own moveset. Space Godzilla is the monster behind the Crystal Plague, summoning a crystal meteor to infect Earth so that it can land on the planet and conquer it for himself. Space Godzilla is an evil alien telekinetic clone of Godzilla himself. He moves slowly yet has the capacity to levitate in the air fast. Despite his weak hand-to-hand combat abilities, he can unleash tremendous energy assaults by generating and absorbing force via crystal spires. Titanosaurus is a prehistoric marine lizard who intends to exploit the power surges to exact vengeance on humanity for disrupting his slumber. Titanosaurus is not initially evil, but chooses to stick to his own beliefs rather than join a group, putting him at conflict with the Earth Defenders and the Global Defense Force. He is a melee warrior with the ability to discharge a supersonic beam from his mouth. He is only available in the Wii version.
While the monster roster was expanded, unfortunately, the arena selection was downscaled. Although this could be due to the fact that each arena has more detail put into it and kind of has its own character, really. Unlike previous games, the cities are kind of already destroyed. Each arena has a different type of apocalyptic look to it, and it does give it a really unique style.
The crystals have a negative impact on all arenas in the game. They've also been substantially reduced in size when compared to earlier games. The game features Tokyo, Osaka, Monster Island, Sydney, San Francisco, London, Seattle, New York, and the Mothership.
There were ideas and design concepts that were examined and debated throughout development of the game, but they unfortunately didn't make the cut.
Fire Lion, the Visitor, and the Lightning Bug. These three, along with Obsidius, were the new monsters that were designed and voted into the game. Crystalac was going to be in the game regardless. Obsidius was the monster who was ultimately elected into the game, while the other three were rejected. The Earth Defenders factions would have included Fire Lion, while the Aliens faction would have included the Visitor and Lightning Bug. Hedorah was not created owing to the complicated cell shading required due to his blob-like nature, as well as his form changes, which were hard to achieve on the Wii. Hedorah would have been a member of the Aliens group. In an interview, King Kong was mentioned. Due to a licensing concern with Universal Pictures, King Kong was not featured. He would have belonged to the Earth Defenders faction. For Mecha Kong, there was an interview where he was mentioned. He would have belonged to the Aliens faction. Gamera was mentioned in an interview. He would have been a member of the Earth Defenders faction. Gamera was most likely excluded due to its ownership by Kadokawa. Because of the bad fan impression of Zilla during the production and release of Godzilla Save the Earth, he was not seriously considered for the game. He would have belonged to the Mutants faction. Bagan was mentioned in a conversation. He would have belonged to the Mutant faction. Instead of Bagan, the developers elected to incorporate other, more esoteric monsters in the game, with Varan specifically named. Clover was mentioned in a conversation as well. He wasn't even considered to be in the game. Monster X and Kaiser Ghidorah were supposedly considered briefly, but deemed not intriguing enough, and his metamorphosis was way too hard to incorporate in the game. As a result, Monster X was never really considered for inclusion in the game. Los Angeles was dropped because there were not enough cities outside of the United States. There is concept art for LA in the game's gallery, and the basic map still exists in the game files. However, it's completely untextured and is missing buildings, indicating that it was likely dropped early in development. Sydney takes its position in the final game. Mount Fuji was considered for the game, but no work was done on it before it was abandoned. A day and night feature, akin to Godzilla Save the Earth, was originally planned but cancelled for unclear reasons. There would also be power lines in Osaka. They can still be seen in the intro, but they never appear in the game. Power lines were supposed to be present in the majority of the levels and were made up of modified particle visual effects. However, they were removed from the final release of the game owing to causing problems in Godzilla Save the Earth.
There are some really interesting facts in development of this game. Of course, it being an ambitious game, it was bound to have a lot of development stories. And, like before, having a lot of cut content, but also having some other events happen.
Godzilla Unleashed was supposed to be an update to Godzilla Save the Earth and the Wii's launch title, but Atari vetoed the idea. In April 2006, Atari reopened the project for what would essentially become the final edition of Godzilla Unleashed. On November 19, 2007, GameSpot launched a Monster Battles feature in which users could vote on which monster they wished to square off against. Batra, who was one of the monsters in the character pool, was also revealed to be in the game. On December 16, 2007, King Caesar triumphed, with Baragon coming in second. Obsidius received the fewest votes. Most major gaming magazines and websites gave the Wii version of the game negative to below average reviews. Some of the most prominent complaints were about the game's inaccurate controls and general lack of polish in the final release. Some bad magazine reviews stated that the game should only be played by Godzilla fanatics. According to IGN, the game is ugly and awkward, exactly like the giant green guy. However, player reaction to the game are significantly more positive, with reader evaluations average at a 7. Fans applauded the large array of monsters, which included classics such as Biollante and Godzilla 1954, as well as the addition of a custom option, which allowed players to customize the gameplay to their taste. However, not all Godzilla fans were pleased, with several stating identical criticisms to those found in reviews, as well as several fan complaints about the lack of Hedorah and the new creatures. There were also some complaints about the inability to toggle the crystal's infestations in the arenas, allowing players to battle in normal towns. The game's soundtrack was composed by heavy metal music. Each track would be a theme for each character. My personal favorites are from the GDF factions. It's some more trivia time! Godzilla 1990s and Godzilla 1954 are unplayable in story and training mode in the Wii versions of the game, probably because having multiple Godzillas in the story mode would be confusing and/or impossible. Unlike in Godzilla Save the Earth, Megagearus can employ a ray she absorbs endlessly. The disadvantage is that she cannot auto-target, making it difficult to hit repeatedly. Despite this, Megagearus can just barrage her enemies with lasers until they are knocked down. It's also handy in destruction mode and for causing havoc in story mode. If a monster with a dual kick, such as Godzilla 2000 or Gigan, performs that move on a force field corner, it may pass through the barrier and enter the out-of-bounds zone. Monsters can explore backgrounds in some areas, such as Seattle and Osaka. If the glitch is exploited in Seattle, for example, games can wander underneath or on top and around the volcano. Players in Osaka can explore the city's outskirts. Buildings in the background can be stepped on and stood on. This quirk is used sparingly in Monster Island. A building that looks like the White House or the Smithsonian Museum can be found on the north side of New York, and every time the player destroys it, they will lose 3% of their affiliation with the GDF in story mode. Destroya's use of energy is less powerful in the PS2 version of Godzilla Unleashed than it is in the Wii version. Although the CPU will continue to utilize Destroya to consistently attack with his Horn Katana and Micro-Oxygen Beam, it will consume energy. Unlike in the Wii version, Destroya's Horn Katana does not consume energy owing to a coding error. Some gamers have noticed that if Mechagodzilla's normal kick attack is utilized repeatedly, it would appear to be doing the Goose Step, a march invented by Perusia. Except for the submarines from story mode and the Vortac submarines, the player can place any military unit in the game in the arena in custom game mode. If a player plays as Mothra in story mode on day 1 and evolve without freeing the other monsters or traveling to the base, they will be able to fly over the waterfall and depart Monster Island. This is the only Atari Pipeworks Godzilla game available on home consoles that does not include Akira Fukube's Godzilla theme playing over the end credits. The game does, however, have a teaser for Classic Media's Godzilla DVD releases, which features the original Godzilla's main title theme playing over it. There are a few empty levels in the game files: the cancelled Los Angeles stage, an unfinished ocean stage called 60, and a test stage. There are also unused audio files hidden throughout the game. While some duplicates of existing noises, others are original samples that never appeared in the game. For example, there are voice clips for Earth Defender Kaiju being praised with the NI_English file. Among them is Titanosaurus, who is classified as a mutant kaiju in the game. If Godzilla 1990s reaches critical mass in Brawl mode, it will temporarily turn into Burning Godzilla.
Well guys, we've come to the end of the trilogy and this retrospective. But before I leave, I can't forget to mention these two other projects that are related to the Godzilla Atari Pipeworks trilogy. I am of course talking about the Godzilla Unleashed Overhaul mod.
This information was gathered by Atari Godzilla.fandom. The Godzilla Unleashed Overhaul mod is a fan-made modding effort for Godzilla Unleashed by Goji Rex, with the objective of extensively reworking the game's visuals and sound schemes, though it needs ownership of the game to play. It was released in September of 2017. Textures for everything in the game, including creatures and arenas, have been completely upscaled or redone. The textures are frequently brighter and more contrasted than the original game. Every monster from the original game has an upscaled, recreated, or new texture, as well as an alternate texture for effect of their critical mass forms, as well as an additional alternate skin for other sources. To create a more movie-like experience, custom music and noises have been added to the game, including a broad variety of iconic Akira Fukube themes from the films, as well as classic monster roars and sounds taken directly from those films. Though future versions were planned, updates for the mod were halted the following year because new models and animations could not be successfully imported into the game, and other additional features required advanced forms of modding such as hex editing, which were too difficult and time-consuming.
Not only that, but Goji Rex is continuing his modding endeavors by overhauling Save the Earth. Only difference this time is that he actually has a team of developers behind him now, and they're helping to make probably one of the biggest mods ever in the Godzilla community. Now titled Godzilla Save the Earth Melee, the team has said that this mod has become more than just a simple overhaul mod. I see this mod as being the fourth game that we were going to get after Godzilla Unleashed. I'm looking forward to that, and I highly recommend supporting the team. Links are in the description below. Well guys, that's going to be it for my retrospective on the Godzilla Atari Pipeworks trilogy. This video was an enormous task to finish, but I'm really happy the way that it turned out. I hope you all enjoyed, and I once again want to give a huge shout out and thanks to Wikizilla and Super Godzilla Gaming for allowing me to use the articles and gameplay footage to make this video possible. Please go support them. And you can find even more info on Wikizilla on these games of some aspects or facts that I might not have put in or just didn't have the time to. That does it for this month of Godzilla. I hope you all enjoyed this Godzilla month, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Take care.